You are somewhere completely ordinary. Maybe you are sitting in a new restaurant you have never visited before. Maybe you are in the middle of a conversation you have never had. Maybe you are walking down a street in a city you have never been to. And then, out of nowhere, a strange wave washes over you. You have been here before. You have done this exact thing. You know exactly what is about to happen next. Except none of it is possible. Because you have definitely never been here before. This feeling has a name that most people know but very few people fully understand. It is called déjà vu. The phrase comes from French and it means simply, already seen. It lasts only a few seconds. It feels deeply strange. And it happens to almost every human being on the planet at some point in their lives. For centuries, déjà vu was considered a mystery so deep that science could not even begin to explain it. It was used as evidence for past lives, for psychic ability, for alternate dimensions, for the existence of the soul. People built entire belief systems around this strange feeling. And the actual explanation turns out to be even more fascinating than any of those theories. First, let us establish how common this actually is. Studies suggest that between 60 and 80% of people have experienced déjà vu at least once. It is most common in people between the ages of 15 and 25. It happens more often when people are tired or stressed. And interestingly, it happens more frequently to people who travel a lot and people who watch a lot of films. For a long time, scientists struggled to study déjà vu because it is so unpredictable and so brief. You cannot schedule it. You cannot trigger it reliably in a laboratory. It simply arrives, lasts a few seconds, and disappears. Studying something that behaves like that requires creative scientific approaches. The breakthrough came partly from studying people with temporal lobe epilepsy. Some epilepsy patients experience déjà vu as a warning signal immediately before a seizure. Because these episodes could be monitored in a clinical setting with brain scanning equipment running, scientists finally had a way to watch what was happening in the brain during déjà vu in real time. What they discovered was extraordinary. During déjà vu, specific regions of the brain associated with memory were activating in an unusual pattern. The areas responsible for storing and retrieving memories were firing, but without any actual memory being retrieved. It was like a filing system opening a drawer and finding it empty, but the drawer opened anyway. To understand why this happens, we need to understand how memory actually works. And the answer is, much more strangely than most people realize. Memory is not like a video recording. It is not a perfect copy of events stored somewhere in your brain waiting to be played back. Memory is reconstructive. Every time you remember something, your brain is actively rebuilding that memory from fragments. It pulls pieces from different storage locations, assembles them into a coherent narrative, and presents that narrative to your conscious mind as a memory. This process happens so fast and so smoothly that it feels like simply pressing play on a recording. But it is not. This reconstructive process means that memory is surprisingly easy to fool. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable for this reason. People genuinely remember things that never happened. People forget things that definitely did. The brain is not a camera. It is something much messier and much more creative. Now here is where déjà vu begins to make sense. Your brain processes new experiences using two systems that normally work together. The first system processes the raw sensory information, what you are seeing, hearing, and feeling right now. The second system compares that information against your stored memories to determine whether this is familiar or new. Under normal circumstances, these two systems work in perfect sync. New experience comes in, memory system checks it, reports back familiar or not familiar, and you move on with your life without noticing any of this happening. It is fast, seamless, and invisible. But occasionally, especially when you are tired, stressed, distracted, or overwhelmed, these two systems fall slightly out of sync. The memory comparison system fires a fraction of a second early, or the sensory information arrives slightly delayed. And in that tiny gap between the two signals, something strange happens. Your brain receives the memory signal, familiar, before it has finished processing what is actually happening. So by the time your conscious mind catches up to the present moment, the memory system has already labeled it as something previously experienced. Your brain is telling you this is familiar before it has even fully registered what this is. The result is déjà vu. A moment that feels remembered but cannot be placed. A sensation of familiarity with no actual memory attached to it. Your brain filed the experience as known before it finished deciding what the experience even was. The label arrived before the content. This is called the dual processing theory of déjà vu, and it is one of the most widely accepted scientific explanations currently available. It essentially describes déjà vu as a timing glitch, a momentary desynchronization between the part of your brain experiencing the present and the part of your brain evaluating the present. There is a second major theory that approaches déjà vu from a completely different angle. It is called the memory interference theory. And it starts with a surprisingly simple observation about how your brain stores visual information. When you enter a new environment, your brain does not process the entire scene as one single thing. It breaks the scene into components. It processes the layout separately from the colors. It processes the spatial relationships separately from the objects. It processes familiar elements separately from unfamiliar ones. Now here is the key insight. You may have never been in this specific restaurant before. But your brain has stored thousands of memories of other spaces. Other rooms with similar layouts. Other dining areas with similar arrangements of tables and chairs. Other spaces with similar lighting and similar proportions. If the new environment contains enough elements that individually match fragments from stored memories, even memories from completely different contexts, your brain may begin generating a familiarity signal. Not because you have been here before, but because enough pieces of here remind your brain of enough pieces of other theirs. Your brain is essentially running a similarity search across all your stored spatial memories simultaneously. If enough matches come back positive, the familiarity signal crosses a threshold and you experience that strange sense of having been somewhere before. Even though you absolutely have not. There is supporting evidence for this theory from a fascinating study where researchers used virtual reality to create environments. They built new virtual spaces that contained the same spatial layout as familiar environments, like the same arrangement as a scene from a popular video game, but with completely different visual details. People experience déjà vu in these new spaces at higher than normal rates simply because the underlying structure matched something stored in memory. A third theory focuses specifically on the role of attention. Sometimes you encounter something, a scene, a face, a place, and you process it subconsciously without giving it your full attention. Maybe you glanced at it briefly. Maybe you were distracted. Maybe you processed it in your peripheral vision without consciously registering it. This subconscious processing can create a very weak memory trace. Not strong enough to remember as a clear conscious memory, but strong enough to generate a familiarity signal when you encounter the same thing again moments later with your full attention. The result feels like remembering something from the distant past when you actually registered it just seconds ago. Think about walking into a room while distracted and then turning around to really look at it. Sometimes that full attention version feels strangely familiar because your brain already processed a weak version of it moments before. The gap between the subconscious registration and the conscious attention is small enough that the brain interprets it as a much older memory. This theory helps explain why déjà vu is more common when people are tired or distracted. In those states, you are more likely to be processing your environment partially and subconsciously rather than with full conscious attention. More subconscious processing means more opportunities for that split-second gap between weak registration and full awareness. There is also a neurological explanation involving the rhinal cortex, a region of the brain involved in generating feelings of familiarity. Under normal circumstances, the rhinal cortex sends a familiarity signal only when prompted by actual memory retrieval from the hippocampus. But occasionally the rhinal cortex fires independently, without being triggered by actual memory retrieval, and sends a familiarity signal anyway. When this happens, you experience the feeling of familiarity completely disconnected from any actual memory. Your brain is telling you this feels familiar but cannot tell you why, because there is no actual memory causing the feeling. It is a false alarm from the familiarity detection system, triggered by a glitch rather than by a genuine match. Now let us talk about something equally strange that happens alongside déjà vu in many people. The feeling that you know what is about to happen next. During déjà vu, many people report a strong sense of being able to predict the next few seconds of the experience. The next word someone is going to say. The next thing that is going to appear around a corner. This predictive feeling is actually your brain doing something very natural. Once the familiarity signal fires, your brain immediately begins searching its memory banks for what comes next in the remembered sequence. It is trying to complete the pattern. The problem is there is no actual memory to draw from, so the prediction dissolves within seconds, which is why déjà vu always ends before you can actually confirm whether your prediction was correct. Déjà vu's opposite also exists and is called jamais vu. Where déjà vu makes familiar things feel strangely experienced before, jamais vu makes genuinely familiar things feel completely new and strange. You might stare at a word you have written 1,000 times and suddenly feel like you have never seen it before. You might look at a face you know well and feel briefly like you are seeing a stranger. Jamais vu happens for similar reasons, a glitch in the familiarity detection system, but in the opposite direction. Instead of a false familiarity signal firing, the familiarity signal fails to fire when it should. The result is the uncanny sensation that something deeply known has become suddenly unfamiliar. Most people find jamais vu significantly more unsettling than déjà vu. There is also presque vu, meaning almost seen, which is the maddening feeling of being on the verge of remembering something without being able to retrieve it. The tip of the tongue experience belongs to this category. You know that you know something. You can feel the memory nearby. But it will not come. These three experiences, déjà vu, jamais vu, and presque vu, are all variations of the same underlying phenomenon. The brain's familiarity system misfiring in different directions. Ancient and historical explanations for déjà vu are genuinely fascinating. Ancient Greek philosophers wrote about the feeling and connected it to the concept of an eternal soul that had lived multiple lives. The familiarity of a new place was evidence that the soul had visited it in a previous existence. This interpretation was deeply comforting to people who experienced it, and it persisted for thousands of years. In the 19th century, déjà vu became connected to ideas about the supernatural and psychic ability. Some people genuinely believed it was evidence of precognition, the ability to see the future. If you felt you had lived a moment before experiencing it, perhaps you had glimpsed it in a dream or a vision. This interpretation made déjà vu feel like a gift rather than a glitch. Sigmund Freud had his own theory, as Freud inevitably did about everything. He believed déjà vu was connected to repressed memories and unconscious desires. The familiar feeling was your unconscious mind recognizing something that your conscious mind had buried. This theory has not held up particularly well under modern neuroscience, but it is historically interesting. What makes the modern scientific explanation so interesting is that it does not make déjà vu feel less remarkable. Knowing that it is a timing glitch or a false familiarity signal does not make the experience feel ordinary. If anything, it makes it more fascinating. You are getting a rare glimpse into the machinery behind consciousness itself. A moment where the usually invisible process of reality construction briefly becomes visible. Every single moment of your waking life, your brain is doing something extraordinarily complex. It is taking raw sensory data, comparing it against millions of stored memories, assembling it into a coherent experience of reality, and presenting that experience to your conscious mind, all within milliseconds. You never notice this process because it works seamlessly. Déjà vu is one of the only moments when it does not. So next time it happens, next time you are sitting somewhere new and that strange wave washes over you, you can think about what is actually occurring. Somewhere in your temporal lobe, a familiarity signal fired a fraction too early, or the wrong memory fragment matched the wrong environmental element, or your rhinal cortex sent a signal without being asked. And for 2 or 3 seconds, the backstage machinery of your brain became briefly, strangely visible. Why do you get that feeling that you have already lived this moment? Because your brain is not a camera. It is not a recorder. It is a constantly running prediction machine that compares every new experience against every old one at extraordinary speed. And occasionally, just occasionally, it makes a small, beautiful, deeply human mistake. And for 2 seconds, the impossible feels real. And then it is gone. And you are left wondering if you imagined the whole thing. Which, in a way, you did.